Hey everyone, this is David Brown from Lyco Birds. Today is June 2nd, 2024, and I went out birding with my brother Bobby and our mom and dad as part of the third PA Bird Atlas. We went up to State Game Land 75 in Lycoming County, Pennsylvania. And fun fact, Bobby helped design the logo for the Atlas, which here you see on a car magnet. If you thought I was getting up early for Braddock Bay, you should have seen what hour Bobby made us get up today. Here we are leaving the house around 5:10 a.m. It took us around 45 minutes to get up to the game lands, and it feels good to be back home and be birding some Pennsylvania mountain forest roads. Here's a look at a map to give you an idea of where State Game Land 75 is. Here's Rochester, New York and Braddock Bay, where I just spent 3 months. But now I'm back home near Williamsport, and you can see State Game Land 75 is in north central Pennsylvania in northwestern Lycoming County. This Pennsylvania Game Commission PDF says State Game Land 75, comprising 27,499 acres, is located in northwestern Lycoming County. This mountainous and heavily forested tract contains several excellent small trout streams. The primary game species are bear, deer, turkey, and ruffed grouse. And here's a map showing the shape of the whole thing, and I guess the main point is 27,000 acres. This is a huge area, and you could literally spend the rest of your life just birding this area and not cover the whole thing. One aspect of the Atlas are these random point counts where you go to a spot for 6 minutes and record all of the birds that you see and hear. And if you can't get to the exact spot because it's in the middle of nowhere, or as the case was here, there was a stream across the road, then you can be within, I think, like a half mile or so. So Bobby ended up doing the point count from next to this power line cut. And the main theme today was that Bobby was taking care of all the eBird checklists, and I was doing iNaturalist, just recording as many plants and butterflies and other things as possible. Here's a parking lot we stopped at next. Last summer, I got into ferns for about 2 weeks, so I'm putting that knowledge to the test. Here we have some common bracken. When you see the understory completely dominated by a single species of fern like this, it's usually hay-scented fern. I always enjoy seeing witch hazel trees, which are usually relatively small. One of the main areas of the game land that we wanted to hit was a grassland area that's adjacent to an active mine. And the weather was absolutely perfect as we walked the road through the grassland. You thought I was done with raptors just because I'm home from Braddock Bay? Well, think again. Here we have a large buteo perched on top of a pole with a box. We see a belly band. This is a red-tailed hawk. This cedar waxwing was perched up nicely at the top of a tree. As was this stripy sparrow. This is a song sparrow. And here's the rest of my family birding the grassland. Here's a male indigo bunting that was perched up on the wire. Here's an American kestrel with prey, and there was a pair of kestrels around, and there was a box nearby, although we never actually saw them go to the box. Here's a brown thrasher that is carrying food, presumably to feed young in a nest, so this would count as confirmed nesting. The Pennsylvania Bird Atlas is a 5-year project where in the summer you're documenting where different species are nesting throughout the state. There's also a winter component to the Atlas as well. Basically, the whole state is divided up into grids, and you want to document for each species what the highest level of nesting is. So it's all done through eBird, and there are different nesting codes. So for example, here we see yellow-bellied sapsucker. There were some there singing. That's a possible code. Or a northern flicker in appropriate habitat. It's possible nesting. So they're present, they're in the right habitat, maybe they're singing, but there's no further signs of nesting. Then you have things like probable. Here we had a food handoff between 2 American kestrels. That could count as courtship. Going farther down, we see the brown thrasher carrying food. That's a confirmed code. So for every species for each individual block, you're looking at what the highest level of confirmed nesting was over the 5-year period. These beautiful yellow and purple flowers are bittersweet nightshade. Here we have a sparrow with a plain breast, a red cap, and a black line through the eye. This is a chipping sparrow. Eventually, the grassland turns into an area of conifer trees, and we were happy to see this red-breasted nuthatch. And here he is being goofy and hanging upside down. Here's a great blue heron that flew by. And we were also happy to see this yellow-rumped warbler, which is a rare nesting species at high elevations in Lycoming County. And we had yet another brown thrasher carrying food. There was a turn in the road, and we headed more into some deep forest area, and I was happy to see our state flower, mountain laurel, although it's not quite yet in full bloom. We sent my dad back to go get the car, and I was a little bit behind my mom and my brother because I was doing iNaturalist, and I saw them waving me to come up, and they were at this spot, and there were some baby turkeys that were chirping in a really cute way, and I never did see them, but Bobby got some photos of them. And here's a fern that I really like. This is cinnamon fern. And the whole reason for taking that road was to get to another point count spot, so that's Bobby up ahead doing the 6-minute point count. My dad picked us up in the car and saved us a lot of walking, and we drove to another point count location. And while Bobby was doing the point count, one of the birds that called was a barred owl. These flowers caught my eye while Bobby was doing the point count, but I was afraid to move because I didn't want to make any noise. So for 6 minutes, I had to stand there ready to run over and put this into iNaturalist to find out what it is. It turns out it's called orange hawkweed. And I'm a little hesitant to say things like this. I'm discovering plants for the first time because I know this is probably the equivalent of a non-birder being like, I found this really cool bird. It's called the American robin. So please excuse my ignorance when it comes to anything non-birds. I'm really doing my best to try to learn more plants and butterflies and dragonflies and everything else that's so amazing to come across in nature. We stopped at this parking area, but my mom and my brother were complaining about this really low frequency sound that they were hearing, or not even hearing so much as feeling. It was like messing with their ears. My dad and I could kind of sense it, but it wasn't bothering me as much as it seemed to be bothering the others. But anyway, we didn't stay at this spot very long. The main highlight for me at that spot was this butterfly, the little wood satyr. There's a spot near the mine that we had hoped to bird, but it turns out that that road was closed, so we had to take a detour, and we ended up at this spot, which I don't know if this area was logged at some point, but it had a deer exclosure and was regenerating, so it was a nice change of habitat. Here's an eastern towhee as it took off. Here's a plant that I always enjoy seeing, mainly because I know how to identify it. This is Comptonia peregrina, sweet fern, which is not actually a fern. Just before leaving that habitat, we stopped at the last parking lot to see if there was anything different. And we were glad we stopped because we had this alder flycatcher perched up on the fence and singing repeatedly. And this was a first of year bird, even for Bobby, who birds the county very extensively. And here we have a monarch butterfly. Or do we? Wait a second. This is a smaller butterfly that is actually a mimic of the monarch. This is a viceroy. And the most distinctive thing about them to me is the small size, along with this line here that's a little bit different than the loop that monarchs have on their wings. At the next stop, I noticed this pretty white and pink ball in an oak tree, and iNaturalist identified it as the woolly catkin gall wasp, Calaristis quercus operator. And I've seen other gall wasp galls on oak trees in the past, but never one cool and fuzzy looking like this. Next, we stopped at this power line cut, and anytime we pass a power line cut like this in Pennsylvania, we always joke about finding golden-winged warblers, because this is the kind of habitat you sometimes find them, but I don't think we've actually ever found one in one of these power line cuts, but we'll keep looking. Here's another one of our large ferns. This is ostrich fern. And what do you know? Here we have a small buteo with somewhat pointed wingtips because it has 4 feathers making up the wingtip. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we see that it's molting its inner primaries and the central tail feathers. This is a juvenile broad-winged hawk. Next, we stopped at the Larson tract of SGL 75, which is a small wetland area. You know how when you go birding at the West Spit, there's that huge multi-million-dollar mansion? This is the tree swallow equivalent of that. The ponds are relatively small, but we did have 2 hooded mergansers. Here's a look at one of the ponds. There were a bunch of these dragonflies flying around, and I put it in iNaturalist, and it's a dot-tailed whiteface. In this photo, you can see the white on the face of the dragonfly. I looked this species up in this book, which is The Natural History of Delmarva Dragonflies and Damselflies by Hal White. And this is an excellent book where for each species, there's an essay about the species and some topic related to it. But for this species, it's a really depressing essay because it's about habitat loss. And it's about how the author, when he moved to Delaware in the early 1970s, he found one of these dragonflies. But that site was later filled in and destroyed to put up a building, and it remains the only record of the species for the Delmarva Peninsula. We continued out of the game lands and down the mountain towards Pine Creek, and this is a typical Pennsylvania mountain forest road where you don't want to look too closely off to your right, or you'll see that you're just feet and inches from plummeting to your death. We ended our day of birding with a stop at Little Pine State Park, which has a beautiful lake. Taking a look at the eBird trip report, you can see the pins of all the different places we hit. So these ones all the way down here on the right, this is close to where we live. And then all the pins up here, we're birding the state game lands and then looping back around and down back home. Altogether for the day, we had around 85 species. And a couple highlights were we had both cuckoos, we had that barred owl, we had a merlin, we had alder and willow flycatcher, and we even had 13 species of warblers. So all in all, a really good day of birding. And a lot of these were new county yearbirds for me. I think out of the 80-some species we had, around half of them were new county yearbirds for me, just because I've been away for the past 3 months. All right, it was a really enjoyable day of birding, leaving around 5 a.m. and then birding from around 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Great day to be out with my family, not only doing birding and the bird atlas, but also getting to do a lot of iNaturalist and learning about different plants and butterflies and all the other amazing parts of nature that Pennsylvania has to offer. I really enjoyed spending time up in the Rochester area this spring, but it's great to be back home in the habitats that I'm more familiar with. And, you know, there's nothing like birding your home county. So really good day to be out. I hope maybe I've inspired you to get out and do some atlasing if you're in PA. And no matter where you are, hopefully I've encouraged you to get out and pay attention to the nature around you. Summer can be a great time to get out. There's so much happening with nature. It's a little slower for the birds now that the migration is winding down, but it can be fun to go at a slower pace and really pay attention to the behavior of the nesting birds and pay attention to all of the other things happening as well. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.